All right, we're back. This is our third of 4 videos for the documentary film project, and today we're going to be talking about finding your audience. As always, these notes are required, and you should know the due date by now. I know I've assigned it, so make sure that you have them. So how can finding your audience help? According to the unit focus that I've given you, this one, learn to appeal effectively to a specific audience by identifying and addressing stakeholders with the balanced use of ethos, pathos, and logos. We find in there that you need to identify and address stakeholders. And that really is going to be that specific audience that's mentioned just a few words before. So finding your audience is going to be really important to this aspect of your grade. So let's start off by defining stakeholders. A stakeholder is an individual or a group of people who have influence on or are influenced by the topic at hand. So whatever your topic is, any person or people who can influence the outcome of your topic or are affected by your topic are stakeholders. And the main audience of your project should be stakeholders. Now, there are so many topics out there that I can't, in this video, address every single one of your possible stakeholders. And it should be your job to think about who the stakeholders for your project are. So who influence your topic and who is influenced by your topic. So instead, what I'm going to do is use this simple cartoon here where we've got this hunter and he's obviously out hunting deer and bears and rabbits. And the bear is speaking for the group and saying, before this goes too far, you really need some stakeholder input. So in this case, we're assuming that the bear and the deer and the rabbit are the stakeholders in this hunter's activity because they're influenced by the outcome of the hunter's activity. So because they're influenced by it, they should have, some say, or they're saying they should have some say in what's going on. This is a simple example, but it will help us when we talk about once you've figured out who has influence on or who is influenced by the topic, how you should go about addressing them. So the first thing you want to do is look at the stakeholders' values and interests. So in this case, we're looking at the values and interests of the animals who are being hunted in the cartoon. And there are 3 things that you want to look for in terms of values and interests. First of all, what are their motivations? In other words, you want to ask yourself, what does this stakeholder desire most? In this case, if we're talking about the cartoon animals, they probably, in the act of hunting, their desire is probably not to die, right? So you ask yourself that question, and then once you answer it, then it helps you kind of figure out, well, if my topic is hunting and the stakeholders don't want to die, and I'm trying to come up with a solution to this potential problem, then my solution can't include those stakeholders dying, or shouldn't include those stakeholders dying. Second, reasonable changes. So how might the stakeholder be willing to compromise? Like maybe the hunter still wants to hunt, the animals don't want to die. Is there a compromise that both would be willing to make that's reasonable to both? And so you start asking yourself that question as you're trying to come up with the solution. And then finally, you look for possible conflicts. So, and this one's pretty simple because it's basically already been answered, but you ask yourself, how might the stakeholder be harmed as you go about trying to figure out what your answer is to this problem? And in this case, it's obvious, the stakeholder could be harmed by dying. And so by identifying that, then like death shouldn't be the answer to the problem that you identify. In this case, the death of animals shouldn't be. And I'm not trying to make a statement here. I'm just saying, look, this is a fairly simple way to look at this topic of stakeholders. So essentially, you want to talk to your stakeholders in a way that you can trigger their motivations, make a reasonable change that minimizes their conflict. And remember that the ultimate goal of this project is to come up with a solution to this issue that you're researching, right? Like you find where the conflict is in the issue, and then you come up with a solution. And so you need to, talk to your stakeholders in a way that they're going to accept this solution. And part of that is addressing their values and interests. Second, you want to think about the impact that your solution is going to have on the stakeholders and the impact that the stakeholders can have on the solution. So, the first thing that you want to ask is, what's the stakeholder's role? In other words, how can the stakeholder feel involved in your topic and the solution to the conflict that your topic is bringing up? So you don't want them to feel powerless. You don't want to take the power away from them, because remember, they have influence on or are influenced by that. So you want them to feel like they're part of the solution, whatever the solution is. What would that be for animals being hunted? Obviously this is a cartoon and animals can't actually participate in that. So I can't answer that, but it might look something like, since these are sentient animals in this imaginary cartoon, maybe, the animals hold a lottery. I don't know, that's a terrible idea, but something like that. And then response to change. If you ask the stakeholder to make a change, will their response be very negative, somewhat negative, or not negative? In other words, you are going to ask any stakeholder to make some kind of change because you're proposing a solution to this conflict, right? So if there's a solution, it implies that everybody's going to need to change a little bit. So you have to ask yourself, okay, I'm asking them to make this change. Are they going to like it? Are they going to sort of like it, sort of not like it? Are they not going to like it at all? And if your answer is that they're not going to like it, probably your solution isn't the best solution for this, for the conflict that you're researching. So essentially, you want to also talk to your stakeholder in a way that they can feel as though they are taking a positive role in the solution to your topic. If they feel like they're being negatively impacted by the solution to your topic, then probably your solution isn't the right solution, right? So if my earlier suggestion was for these animals to hold a lottery for which ones they're going to be hunted, the ones that are going to be hunted are still going to feel as though they're being negatively impacted, and so that's probably not the best solution for those stakeholders. Hopefully that makes sense. You need to consider when talking about stakeholders or thinking about stakeholders is the stakeholders' involvement. So you can think about what information do they need in order to understand this topic. So what does the stakeholder need to know to understand the topic? That will help you explain the topic in a way that can get the stakeholders to buy in to your solution. So if you're giving them the information you need, like if the hunter were to talk to the animals in a way that was like, well, this is a really important thing. It's for me to feed my family. My family can't live without these. Then that might make the stakeholders, in this case the animals, a little bit more sympathetic, I guess, to a solution that includes hunting. So you want to be able, if you give a stakeholder the right amount of information or the right type of information, they may be more willing to go along with the solution that you're providing. You want to consider their limits to changes. So how far is too far in terms of what changes the stakeholder is willing to make? In this case, in the case of hunting, death might be or probably is too far based on some other questions that we've already asked ourselves in this case, for these imaginary animals at least, right? So you'd have to ask yourself that, how far are my stakeholders willing to go? And you also want to consider peer pressure. So you can consider, well, maybe my stakeholders won't respond well without the influence of somebody else who has influence over them. So maybe there's another group of people who can apply pressure to my stakeholders if that other group of people buys in. And in that case, how can I use that group of people to help my stakeholders buy in? So essentially, you want to give your stakeholder information that leads them to make a reasonable change and that hopefully pressures others to do the same thing in terms of that change. So this is all very simple on the surface, but then when you start to do this, when you start to really think about stakeholders, it gets tricky because you have to think, all right, well, if my main audience is my stakeholders and I'm trying to get, to push my agenda, which is the solution to this conflict, I have to be able to talk to these stakeholders in a way that they're willing to make a change. And that is really difficult. You have to use rhetoric, which was in a different video, to do that, but you also have to make sure that you're talking to your stakeholders and to your audience in a way that's going to be effective. Because if you don't talk to your audience in a way that's effective, then the solution that you're proposing isn't going to go anywhere, right? And your ultimate goal is to make an argument that's going to convince people that you're right, including the stakeholders. And so you want that to be the case. For your reflection, I'd like you to consider these questions. How might formulating a message to stakeholders be harder than it seems at first, and why? And I want you to consider your topic specifically while you're answering this question. I'll see you with your notes on time.